Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Bava Kamma. This is our 7th class, and we will be reviewing Daf 42 through 48. This was supposed to be last week, so this is going to be a review of last week's Daf. And just to remind you that this Wednesday we will also have a class to review this week's Daf. So thank you all for your flexibility. So we're going to be reviewing from Daf 42. So Daf 42 tells us that if a person intended to kill a person, so then they get capital punishment, but you don't pay any monetary fine that you would have incurred. If you remember, we learned this before. This is the principle of kimle midrabamine, which means that if you're liable for two separate punishments, one monetary and one capital, you are going to get the capital punishment, but not the monetary punishment. If an ox does this, so then you pay for the damage done, you pay for the damage done. Let's say the owner of an ox who is tam. Again, tam means they've never injured another animal before. So the owner doesn't pay if the ox gores a slave and kills them. So generally the punishment would be paying 30 shekel. But again, so let's say, sorry, 1 second. One second. Okay. Okay. So, okay. Let's say the owner shechted the animal, killed the animal before it could be killed. Remember, we said that if an ox kills an animal, if an ox kills a person, that ox will be killed. So then, if the owner kills it beforehand, before any payment was done, you don't sell it to pay for the 30 shekel. Again, because the ox was killed already, that's the end of the responsibilities of the owner. Okay, Rabbi Akiva says that damages are made by a tam, are only paid from its body. If you remember, we said, right, we have two types of animals. Tam means they've never injured before. Mu'ad means that they've been warned. They've done it already 3 times. If a tam animal causes injury, the money that is going to be paid to the injured party comes directly from the sale of that original ox, the body of the ox. Now, let's say we said that if the ox kills a person, the owner of the ox has to pay something called Kofer. Kofer means a certain sum of money to that person or to their family. So the question is, what is Kofer based on? What's the value? So the Gemara tells us it's based on the value of the person that was killed. Right, for the slave, it's always 30 shekel. And then there's a distinction made between if it was killed by a tam or a mu'ad. As we said, if the man dies before collecting damages, then the money goes to the person's inheritors, right? So they inherit that money. So too with women, that the money does not go to their husband, but goes to their children or to whoever who's going to inherit them, because it's being paid after her death. So if it's being paid after her death, so then the money goes to her children, not to her husband. The husband inherits anything that she owns at the time of death. But if she inherits something afterwards, it goes to her children and not to her husband. he also doesn't inherit the rights to the other damages, even when she's alive. And then the Gemara says, no, only if she's divorced does the other damages go to her inheritors, but if she's still married, then the money does go to her husband. Daf 43 tells us, no, even if she's divorced, the money actually still goes back to her husband. Or maybe it depends on how they're paying the damages. If they're paying with land, or if they're paying with cash, with money. Then the Gemara says, no, it doesn't matter. Either way, the husband inherits the rights to his wife's compensation. So he does get the rights to the compensation. Okay, let's say an ox kills a slave by accident, so then you don't pay the 30 shekel. If the ox kills a person, a free person, by accident, so then you don't pay kofer, right? These monetary penalties are only paid if the person, if the ox did it on purpose. It's interesting, you might ask, how do you know if they did it on purpose? But I think if you see the ox coming right at you, it seems to be on purpose. And if not, then maybe not. If a person admits that that his ox killed a person, so then he doesn't have to kill the ox and he doesn't pay kofer. Because again, because he's admitting to the crime, right? He'll pay for the damages, but he doesn't have to pay the other things. If witnesses come and say that this ox killed a person, but they weren't sure if the ox was tam or mu'ad, and then the owner comes and admits that it's mu'ad, so then the owner does pay kofer, because again, there were already witnesses. If there were no witnesses and he admits it, so then he does not pay kofer. Okay, the same case, but let's say the ox killed a slave. So then the person, again, doesn't pay the 30 shekel, because again, when you admit it, you don't pay the fine, and therefore you don't pay the 30 shekel. Again, here it's without witnesses. And again, right, if you admit it without witnesses, you do not pay the fine. Okay, or the Gemara gives another opinion that if an ox killed a slave, so then you do need to pay for damages, or again, only if it's on purpose, or if it's by accident, but there were witnesses who saw it and it's not like you admitted it. Let's say a fire killed a person by accident, right? You started a fire and it killed a person by accident. You don't pay for the damages because it was an accident. Another opinion is you don't pay because of kimle. If you remember, as we said in the beginning, if a person died because of, hold on, wait, can you still hear me? Yes, okay, for some reason my camera just froze. Hold on 1 second. Why is my camera not working? Okay, it doesn't really matter. Let's see if I turn it off and then I start it again. Sorry. Okay. We're back. Okay, so we said if a fire killed a person by accident, you don't pay for damages. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, no, you don't pay for damages because you're liable for capital punishment, right? If you started a fire that caused the death of a person, it doesn't mean that you're not liable. You are liable, but you're going to be liable for capital punishment. Therefore, you don't have to pay the monetary fine. Okay, the verse says im kofer, meaning with kofer. You pay kofer even if it's by accident. Again, if the ox killed a person, you need to pay kofer. Again, kofer is a certain amount of money to the person's heirs. Maybe it also means with a slave. The Gemara says not necessarily. We don't say that it also means if the ox kills a slave by accident, maybe you don't pay the 30 shekel. We said that the week before, we said that minors are also included in this discussion, meaning if an ox kills a minor, it's as if he killed an adult. It doesn't matter. You need to pay kofer for them as well. So too, if a person kills a minor, right, they're treated as if they killed an adult. It doesn't matter if you kill a minor or if you kill an adult. Okay, even if this is on top 44, even if the ox is tam and he kills, he's treated the same. Whether he kills a boy or a girl, it doesn't matter. And maybe it's not the same because you might have thought that maybe there should be a distinction because minors, right, a boy or a girl are not, they're not commanded to do mitzvot, so maybe I don't want to use the word their lives are worth less because that's not what I mean, but they are less capable of doing commandments. So maybe you would be less liable. And the Gemara says no, right? The verse teaches that it's applied to adults and minors across the board. It doesn't matter whether you killed an adult or a minor. I'm not sure about like American law. If there like would you get a different sentence if you killed a minor versus killing an adult? No, it's the same. Okay, so interesting. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 44 tells us that an ox that rubbed against the wall and then the wall fell and it killed a person. Okay, so this is not where the ox got angry and pushed the wall into a person, but the ox was kind of minding his own business and he was just rubbing up against the wall and then the wall fell and killed a person. Or, right, this mission is going to be accidents, basically, right? Let's say the ox meant to kill an animal, but it ended up killing a person by accident. Or it meant to kill a non-Jew and it killed a Jew. Or it meant to kill a non-viable baby, but it ended up killing a viable baby. In all of these cases, the ox is exempt, meaning if it's done unintentionally, if there was an accident or they didn't intend the consequence of whatever happened, so then the ox or the owner of the ox is exempt. So now the Gemara says, wait a minute, exempt from what? So the Gemara says the ox is exempt from being killed, but you still need to pay kofer, meaning the fact that the person was killed, you still need to pay the heirs for that, but you don't kill the animal because it didn't do it on purpose. Or maybe you don't even pay kofer because it was an accident or it wasn't intentional. Why? Maybe the ox is tam and like, again, didn't mean it. So the Gemara says, no, the ox was a mu'ad and therefore you have to pay kofer because the ox was a wild ox and you should have been watching that ox. If it was rubbing against the wall for benefit, right? Again, it's not seen as an aggressive act, and that's why you don't kill it, because again, it's not an aggressive act. Okay, the power, right, but, right, the power of the ox is what killed the person, not the actual body of the ox, and therefore you shouldn't have to pay kofer because the body itself didn't cause the death. And the Gemara says, no, if the body pushes the wall, which went into the person, it's as if it's an extension of the body, and therefore you do pay kofer. Okay, if the animal was mu'ad, right, again, this wild bull, and it killed on purpose, you kill it and you pay kofer. If it was mu'ad, but it killed by accident, you pay kofer, but you don't kill it because it was an accident. If it was tam, right, Ferdinand, it was this calm bull, but it kills on purpose, right? You got it mad, so it killed on purpose. You kill it, but you don't pay kofer because it wasn't mu'ad. And if it's a tam and it killed by accident, you're exempt from both. You don't kill the ox and you don't pay kofer. Okay, let's say the ox causes damage by accident. Right, so now we're talking about damage, not killing, but it caused damage by accident. So then Rabbi Yehuda says you're liable, and Rabbi Shimon says you're exempt. We learn from payments for killing a person, right? And it's parallel. Or you learn from the liability of the ox, right? And not the owner, right? Do we learn it from the kofer, from the payments, or from when you kill it or you don't? Let's say an ox intended to kill one person, but it killed another person, right? So again, it wanted to kill a person, it just killed a different person. So then the owner is exempt from paying kofer because it was not, right? I guess in American law, you would call like premeditated, right? He didn't want to kill that person. Therefore, you do not pay kofer. Same with a person, as I said, right? If a person meant to kill A, but ended up killing B, there's different liability. There's a different liability. Still, there is liability, but it's different. If a person killed the wrong person, then that person doesn't get killed. But however, Chachamim say the person does get killed, meaning you still killed a person, so then you should be killed because you still killed a person. So let's say a person, here's where the Gemara likes to create very creative cases. A person threw a stone into a group of 10 people, right? So he meant to kill somebody or harm somebody, but he didn't know who, right? So let's say it was 9 non-Jews and 1 Jew, or 5 and 5. So then the person is exempt because we're lenient in capital cases that have a doubt, right? I'm not sure if you were going to kill a Jew or a non-Jew. Again, different punishments, and therefore you are exempt. It is very interesting, even though we do have capital punishment, it's interesting how the Torah and the Jewish law tries to be as lenient as possible for capital punishment. Even if it was 9 Jews and 1 non-Jew, it's seen as fixed, meaning every person is 50-50 chance of being a Jew or a non-Jew. This is an interesting halachic idea that if nothing is moving, then it's 50-50 chance, even though that's not true in terms of normal probability. But in Jewish law, if something is fixed, meaning it's not moving, then it's a 50-50 probability. And therefore you're exempt because we are lenient in capital punishment. Lizette asked a question about fire, but we're going to get to fire later on in the Masechet. So we're going to wait when we get to fire, whether it's intentional, unintentional, we're going to get there. Okay, we're still talking about oxen, so let's do that. So the Mishnah says, an ox that is owned by a woman or orphans or an agent is responsible for it, or it's wild, or it belongs to a convert who doesn't have any children, right? Anyone to inherit him. So then, if it does harm, so it gets killed, or the wild ox or a sanctified ox are exempt because they don't have any owners. Again, a woman or children are still owners. Maybe they have less power in controlling their ox, but they still need to be responsible for their ox. Wild oxen obviously cannot be controlled because nobody owns them. Okay, so the Gemara says that it says in the Torah the word ox, shor, 6 times, and this is coming to include all of these different groups of people that they too are liable. Rabbi Yehuda says that if the ox gores and then the owner sanctifies it, so then he's exempt from killing the ox because now it doesn't belong to him anymore. Let's say the ox, the ox needs to be in the same status at the time of the accident and at the time of the court case. If it is at a different status, meaning if it was sanctified, so then it cannot be held liable because it doesn't have the same status. Okay, the next Mishnah on the bottom of 44, an ox that's going out to be stoned. Again, that's this ox that we've been discussing, that the ox is going to get killed because it killed somebody else. In the Torah, in Hebrew, it's called Shor Haniskal. It is an ox that is going to be stoned. This ox is right, basically like we would call dead man walking, right? It does not have any value, and the owner cannot get any benefit from it. But let's say, so it's going out to be stoned. Let's say the owner sanctifies it as it's going to get stoned. The Gemara says that's invalid. It doesn't work. You don't have any ability to sanctify something. You don't own it anymore. If he slaughters it, so you can't eat the meat because, again, it's already been past the verdict. It is as if it is going to be killed or as if it's killed already, and therefore you can't do anything to it. If he did do these things before the verdict, it is valid because the verdict hasn't been established yet. If he gave an ox to a watchman, and there are 4 types of watchmen, we're going to discuss this in the Gemara in a minute, then they are liable like the owner, right? So if under their watch, if it's mu'ad, it does damage, you have to pay full damage. If it's tam, you pay half the damage. So now the Gemara explains. The beginning of the Mishnah said, right, if you sell the ox before the verdict, it's a valid sale. If you slaughter it, you can eat the meat, again, before the verdict. After the verdict, it is invalid. Okay, Daf 45 tells us if the guard returns it to the owner before the verdict, so then it's considered returned, and whatever happens, happens. If it's after the verdict, it's seen as dead, because again, after the verdict, it's already, on death row, we could say. Right? No, or another opinion is it's considered returned, and that's the end. There's a machloket if something is forbidden from getting benefit from, if you can just return it and say like, oops, sorry, like, didn't realize, or no, right? So then again, the Gemara says actually everyone agrees that you can return something that's forbidden to get benefit from. And right, whatever happens to it, and that's not seen as your liability. There is a machloket if you can have the court case without the ox, or right, does the owner need to be involved or no? Right, maybe he does not need to be involved. So now according to Jewish law, there are 4 types of guards or watchmen. These are called the Arba Shomrim, right? A Shomer is a guard. So who are the 4 Shomrim? The first one is called Shomer Chinam, which means that you're just doing your friend a favor, right? Can you watch my cat while I'm away? Sure, no problem, right? That's called Shomer Chinam. You're not getting paid for it. So because you're not getting paid for it, you're just doing me a favor. So then you have certain liability, but most of it you're exempt from because I'm just doing you a favor. So you're exempt from if it gets stolen or if it gets lost. You're only liable for negligence, right? So if I say, can you watch my cat? And then you don't feed my cat for a week and it dies, that's your responsibility because you're doing me a favor, but the least you can do is feed my cat, right? The next 2 shomrim are similar. One is shomer sachar, right? I hire you, right? I pay you to watch my cat. I don't have a cat, by the way, right? But I pay you to watch my cat. Or socher, right? You rent my cat for a week, right? Let's say you want to rent my cat, right? You pay me, right? So either I pay you or you pay me. But if there's money being exchanged, so then you have greater liability, meaning if the animal is, or if the object is stolen or lost, you are responsible because you're now being paid to watch this animal or whatever, or object, and obviously negligence. You are exempt for accidents, right? If, it fell down the stairs and it wasn't anybody's fault, it just slipped and fell, that's not your fault. So you're not liable for accidents. And the last one is a borrower, right? I borrow this from you. So then they can use it. And again, nobody pays it, and they don't pay, right? You don't pay them and they don't pay you. They are liable for everything, right? So meaning if you borrow my glass vase and then you broke it, right? Again, it fell. You're responsible to pay me back because you borrowed it, right? I didn't ask you to watch it for me. You borrowed it on your own accord. So those are the four shomrim. And again, each one has a varying degree of responsibility. Okay, so now the Gemara tells us that all the watchmen are like owners, right? So therefore, if a tam kills while they're watching it, right, it gets killed, but you don't have to pay Kofer. If it's mu'ad, it gets killed and you have to pay Kofer, and they have to pay the value of the ox to the owner, right? Meaning they should have watched the ox, that these things didn't happen. They didn't. And therefore, they need to pay back the owner the value of the ox. Except for, right, all of these, this is true for all of the shomrim, except for the shomer chinam, right? If your friend is doing you a favor, so then they don't have to pay, right? If one of these things happens, they do not, unless it's negligence. But if it's not negligence, they do not have to pay. Okay, so now the question is, what's the case, right? Did they watch it carefully or not? And now we're going to learn, and we'll see this later on, there's different types of shmirah, of guarding. There's minimal shmirah, and then there's superior shmirah. And the question is, what obligation did you have, right? So like, let's say you closed the door, right? You left your house, you closed the door, the cat was inside. That is minimal shmirah. Let's say the door was kind of like flimsy. If let's say it wouldn't withstand a very strong wind, right? But if it withstands like regular amounts of wind, so then that's fine. Minimal shmirah is enough for a shomer chinam, right? The person who's just doing you a favor, but not for the others, right? If you're being hired to, right, to watch the cat, and you just, let's say, close the screen door, that's not enough, right? You need to lock it or, do something more serious. Or maybe also for the renter, maybe that's enough. And we say, no, the renter is like the shomer sachar, the person who's being paid to watch it, and therefore they need better supervision. If the shomer chinam, again, the friend, is watching the ox, if it killed, so then he is liable. If it got damaged, so then he's exempt, right? Meaning he accepted upon himself to watch it so that it doesn't damage somebody, but he doesn't take responsibility to make sure it doesn't get damaged. Therefore, he's exempt from that payment. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how you watch these things. So the next Mishnah tells us, if you tied up the ox or you closed the door, and then it came out and it damages something, you're liable if it's tam or if it's a mu'ad, meaning either way you're liable, says Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, if it's tam, you're liable, but if it's mu'ad, you're exempt. Rabbi Eliezer says you can only watch it with a knife, meaning by killing it, meaning there's no way to watch this animal properly. So now the Gemara is going to explain. For a tam, again, tam means regular, calm animal, needs minimal watching, and the mu'ad, right, who we know is a little bit, who's wild, needs superior guarding. Right, the verse teaches that even the tam needs superior guarding, right? So again, there's going to be a machloket whether you need superior guarding or only minimal guarding. Or maybe the mu'ad needs minimal and the tam needs superior, right? Because you don't know what it's going to do. Or maybe the tam and the mu'ad only need minimal guarding. So now the Gemara explains, right? You only need to pay the tam part, right? You only need to pay half of the damage, but not the mu'ad damage, right? Again, mu'ad is full damage, tam is half the damage. Okay, and with that, we finish the 4th chapter of Bava Kamma, and now on Daf 46, we are going to start the 5th chapter of Bava Kamma. Okay, so the Mishnah tells us that an ox gored a pregnant cow, and then you find the cow and the dead calf next to it. And the question is, you don't know if the cow gave birth before it was gored or after it was gored, meaning who caused the death of the calf? Was it the ox, the other ox, or not? So the Gemara tells us that you pay half of the damages for the cow, right? Because again, it was tam, so you pay half, and you pay a quarter for the calf, because really you should pay half, but we're not sure, so you pay a quarter. You pay half of the half. Okay. The Mishnah continues that if a pregnant cow gored an ox, and then you found the calf next to it, so then you pay half of the damages from the cow, right, who did the damage, and you pay a quarter of the damages from the value of the calf, right? Because again, we don't know if the calf was inside the animal, inside the cow, when it gored. Okay, so now the Mishnah is going to explain. The Gemara is going to explain. The Mishnah is according to Sumkus, who says that you split the difference when there's a doubt. Remember, we said we're not sure if the calf was inside the animal at the time of the damage or not. Therefore, you split what you think, right? So if you're supposed to get half, so you split it and you get a quarter. Chachamim say, no, we learned this before, hamotzi michavero alav hara'aya. If you want to extract money from a person, then you need to prove that they owe you that money, right? So you have to prove if you want to get the money, so the burden of proof is on the damaged party, and you do not split the difference. Okay, let's say you bought an ox and it turns out that it was a gorer, right? It turns out that it was a wild animal. Rav says that it was a mistaken transaction, and then you can get a full refund. Shmuel says, no, what do you mean? I sold it to you because I thought you were just going to go kill it for meat, right? So if you're going to kill it for meat, who cares if it's wild or not wild? You're just going to go kill it. And then if he wants his money back, then the buyer has to prove that the seller knew that he was buying it for plowing and not for butchering. So then the question is, do we go according to the majority of sales, right? Most oxen, at least in the time, I don't know about nowadays, but in the time of the Gemara, most oxen were sold for plowing, right? Not to be butchered. And therefore, we go according to that. Shmuel says we don't go according to the majority. Rather, again, the burden of proof is on the damaged party. So if they want the money, they have to prove that that was the case. So the Gemara tells us that this principle is based on a verse. And that the verse teaches that it's the damaged party who has the burden of proof. Okay, we said if the pregnant cow gored and the calf was owned by someone else, so then the owner of the cow pays a quarter, right? Because it's half of the half that he owns, and the owner of the calf pays an eighth. Basically, everyone pays a half of what we said before. So originally we said a person pays half and a quarter. So now we're going to say you pay a quarter and an eighth, right? Because each one can say, it wasn't me who did it, it's you who did it. It's your responsibility. Okay, again, right? We don't know if the calf was in the mother when it gored, right? If the calf was in the mother, so then you can take the entire damage from the calf, but we don't know, therefore we split the difference. Okay, next Mishnah, on Daf 47, if a potter places pots in the courtyard of a person without permission, right? You wake up one day and there are pots all over your front yard. So if the owner's animal, right? Again, I wake up and there are pots all over my front yard. So now let's say my dog wakes up and breaks all the pots, right? So then I don't have to pay for the damage because I didn't tell you to put the pots in my front yard. Why'd you put them there? If someone, let's say, right, my neighbor walks by and trips on the pots, so then it's the potter that's liable, not me, even though it happened on my property. I didn't tell you you can put your pots there, so I'm not responsible. If I said, you know what, I'm going to be away tomorrow, so you can put your pots all over my front yard. If I gave you permission, so then I'm liable because I told you you can put the pots all over the front yard. If you put, let's say, produce in someone else's yard, again, and now an animal ate it, you're exempt because, again, they didn't tell you you can do it. If someone was hurt by these, I don't know, they slipped on the apples, so then the owner of the produce is liable. If he put them with permission, so then again, the owner of the courtyard is liable. Let's say you put your ox in someone else's courtyard without permission, right? Again, I wake up in the morning and your Ferdinand is in my front yard or in my backyard, right? Then if my ox comes and then gores your ox, it's not my fault because I didn't tell you to put your ox in my backyard, right? That's why I like, right, if you have a dangerous dog, people have signs, right? Be careful, on my property, there's a dangerous dog. That means if you come onto my property and you get hurt, it's not my fault. I told you not to come in. Same thing here, right? Let's say let's say you put your ox in my backyard, and then your ox gores my ox, so then you're liable. And let's say if it killed someone, so then you have to pay Kofer. And if the ox was there with permission, so again, the owner of the courtyard is liable. Or the owner of the courtyard is only liable if he took it upon himself to guard the things that were there, right? If I say, no, don't worry, you can put it there, I'll watch it, that's a different story, right? Because then I'm taking responsibility. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to explain more. If a person asks permission to put something in your backyard, there's a machluket. If I say yes, does that mean sure, but it's not my responsibility, like you're just putting it in my backyard, right? Am I taking responsibility for any damage done to it? Or maybe I take responsibility for your things that they won't get damaged. And then the owner of those things doesn't have any responsibility because they put it in your backyard. Right? Let's say the owner of the produce is only responsible if an animal slipped on the produce. But if an animal, right, again, you put all your apples in my backyard, then my cow comes and eats all the apples and dies because it ate all the apples, right? So then that's not your fault because it was my animal that ate all the apples. Like, you shouldn't have eaten all the animals, like all the apples. I should have watched my animal from eating all the apples. But if my animal slips on your apple, so then you're liable because you shouldn't really have put them there because you didn't ask permission. So the Gemara gives some stories. A woman brings some wheat into a courtyard to grind it. Or I guess you have a mill in your backyard, and she does it without permission. And then an animal gets injured by that grain, so then she's responsible. If the person's courtyard, his animal eats the grain, we said that she's exempt. Again, you have to watch that your animals don't eat things, but again, if they get hurt, they get hurt. As we said, right, what is the courtyard's owner's responsibility, right? Is it only to guard against his property from damaging or any damage happening to the things that are there, right? So if you put your produce in someone else's yard without permission, and then let's say an ox from somewhere else comes and eats it, so then the owner of the courtyard is exempt because I can't control who comes in and out of my yard. If they're there with permission, so then I am liable. Okay, Daf 48 tells us, right, that when the produce is in the courtyard with permission, so when the ox eats it, so then it's shen. If you remember, shen really means tooth, right? Which means that the animal is eating, right? It's getting benefit, but it's doing damage, and it's happening at sorry, I don't know what's going on. Somebody is sharing their screen. Okay. Okay. So if an animal is getting benefit in the property of their where they're from, so then you're liable because you're not supposed to be eating other people's produce, right? If they're there without permission, so then it's as if it's right getting benefit in a public property, even if it's a private property, but it's kilo, you're not, anyone can be there, or sorry, you're not really supposed to be there. So then you're exempt because you're there, again, without permission. If you brought the ox into someone else's courtyard without permission, and an ox came from somewhere else, and the owner of the ox is exempt. But again, we said if they're there with permission, so then he is liable. This is according to Rabbi Tarfon, who says that abnormal, aggressive behavior in a otherwise docile animal, in a tam animal, in the courtyard of the damaged property, you need to pay full damage. If you remember, we said generally the sages say that for tam, you only pay half damages. Rabbi Tarfon says that if you do it in my backyard, right, your ox goes into my backyard and gores my ox, so then you should pay full damages. That's what Rabbi Tarfon says. Right? Therefore, if the ox is there with permission, so then you're liable. And if it's there if it's without permission, so then you only pay half of the damages, right? It depends why the animal is there in the first place. Okay, another story. A woman comes into someone's courtyard with permission to bake her bread, right? Let's say she doesn't have an oven, you have an oven, she comes to your house to bake the bread. The owner of the courtyard, his goat eats the dough and dies. Okay, so now, right, so the Gemara tells us she's liable to pay for the goat because she was there with permission. If she's there with permission, so then she took responsibility to make sure that no damage happens. Right, because, right, when you go and bake bread, so then she's assuming responsibility because the owner, it's interesting, the Gemara says, because she's going to be kneading the bread, so she's going to be revealing her arms, and that's not very modest. So the owner of the courtyard is going to leave, and if the owner of the courtyard is going to leave, then it must be that she's accepting responsibility to make sure that everyone in the courtyard is safe, right? And nobody gets injured. If she's just there to grind the wheat, so then he's going to stay because that's a modest activity. He's going to stay, and therefore she doesn't take upon herself responsibility, and therefore she isn't liable. So it is interesting when we're learning this Gemara, not only is it teaching us the law, but it's also teaching us, right, what's the mindset behind these laws, right? What's going on when someone enters someone else's courtyard? Is there an assumption that they're taking responsibility for any damage that's going to be caused or not, right? Are they going to be alone in that courtyard or not, right? And what is the responsibility of everybody involved? So I think it's just very interesting to think about. Okay, if a person puts his ox in someone else's courtyard without permission, right? And then the ox digs a pit in the courtyard, then it's a very smart ox, then the owner of the ox is liable to pay for damages to the courtyard. And then the owner of the courtyard is liable if someone falls into the pit and gets hurt, because as soon as he saw the pit, he should have filled it up. It's his courtyard. So it is interesting, right? Who's responsible for what? Let's say an ox defecates in this area onto utensils, and he ruins these utensils. So then the owner of the ox is actually exempt, because dung is like a pit, like a bore, and it's exempt from damaging utensils. We're going to learn this next week, i.e. on Wednesday, that if utensils get damaged in a pit, you are exempt. It's not because it's a logical thing, it's because it's based on a verse. And because dung is seen as ownerless, it's like a pit that is ownerless, and therefore you are exempt. Let's say a person trespassed and caused damages, so then they are liable for the damages that they caused. If a homeowner damages the trespasser, so then they're exempt, because they can say, what were you doing on my property, right? Only if he didn't know that he was there. But if he knew that he was there, so then he is liable, because we say, right, you can evict the person that's on your property, but you're not allowed to harm a person that's on your property, which is, again, an interesting dilemma. Let's say two people have permission to be somewhere, or they both don't have permission to be somewhere. So then if they harm each other, then they're both liable because they're on the same level. If they are harmed, they're both exempt because, again, they're on the same level. If only one of them has permission to be there, then he's exempt because he has permission to be there, and the other person is liable because they're trespassing. They have no right to be in that area. Let's say an ox fell into someone else's cistern. Again, a cistern is a pit that is filled with plaster, and then it collects rainwater. So let's say the ox fell into the cistern, and now because it's gross, it ruins the water in the cistern. So then the owner of the ox is liable, right, is responsible to pay back the damage of the ruined water, if it happened at the same time, right? But if it fell into the water and then only later it ruins the water, so then you're exempt. Again, because the ox is a pit, right? Again, if it falls and then nothing happens and then it ruins the water, when it's sitting there, it's like a pit, and then the water is like the utensils of a person. And that we said, right, that again, utensils that get ruined in a pit you're exempt from paying back. Or you're only liable if the ox ruined the water with its body, but if it's from, let's say, the stench of the carcass, so then you are exempt. Okay, last case for tonight, a second to last case. If an ox was mu'ad, right, was warned for falling on people, and then it saw food in the cistern, and then it fell into the cistern, and it killed somebody inside by accident, so then you pay Kofer, right? You pay Kofer. You don't kill the ox because, again, it was an accident, but you do pay Kofer. Or if it was, maybe it was tam, so then maybe you pay half of the Kofer. Or again, maybe you pay full because it happens on the property of the damaged person, of the damaged party. Okay, last case for tonight. If a person says, you can bring your ox into my courtyard, but you need to watch it, right? So I'm giving you permission, but I'm making sure that you maintain responsibility. So if it does damage, so then the owner is liable. If it is damaged, so then the owner of the courtyard is exempt because, again, you should have been watching it. It implies that if he didn't say anything, so then the owner of the courtyard does take responsibility. And the Gemara says, no, maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's considered the courtyard of partners, right? Because I'm letting you in, so I'm giving you shared responsibility, and therefore you're at least liable for half. Okay, with that, we are going to finish for tonight. We are going to pick up this week's daf. We're going to do it at our regular day and time on Wednesday night. So if you can join us, that would be great. If not, it will be recorded. And then next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, it will be our regular scheduled time, hopefully. So wishing everyone a Shavua Tov, and see you on Wednesday, Be'ezrat Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi.